Kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another, I was going to say edition of the Department of Conversation. This is not a podcast. This is me doing this responsive video stuff that I've started to do. It's a bit of fun and I enjoy doing it. I am indeed talking once again about some flat earth stuff because it's a fascinating thing and I've been dragged in and I'm quite enjoying it actually. And I think one of the things I'm finding is that as someone who's worked as a journalist for the best part of the last 20 years, on and off, not all the time, but on and off, one of the things I'm enjoying doing is going, oh, so this is your statement, this is your position. Let's test that. And it's what I've been doing. And it's what I've been doing this time around. I've got a few things lined up actually. But of recent times, one of the things I've been doing is investigating what a black swan theory is in the flat earth. Now, the black swan theory in general, my best understanding is to disprove the statement, all swans are white, you just need one black swan. That disproves that statement. So therefore, what the flat earth community is saying is to disprove the globe, we just need one event proof piece of evidence that goes against the globe model, and then the whole thing is disproven. So in other words, if they have one really clear idea or piece of evidence that can't happen on a globe, then that's enough. And then that's what they call the black swan. Now, actually, there is a piece of evidence, and I put parentheses around that, that you are hearing the flat earth community talk about when they talk about the black swan, and that is this. This is an image of a couple of oil rigs, which the flat earth community are saying should not be able to be seen like this on a globe. If it's a little bit unclear for you, as it is with many, then I was lucky enough to have flat earth bigwig Mark Sargent on about the time this image became used as evidence. So let's let Mark Sargent explain it to us. Excuse the podcast background. We're actually doing this in my bedroom at the last lockdown about 15 months ago.
He shows you the exact, he'll show you, he'll break it all down for you. But the short version is this. Here's platform C and platform habitat at 6 miles and 9 miles or 7 miles and 10 miles. Doesn't really matter. That's not really the point. The point is when you start looking at this, he's going to zoom in here in a second, real time. And here's his height. So eye height is about 8 feet. 2017, he tries to detail it out as best as possible. And there's the one oil rig and then the second oil rig. Platform C is at 6.08. We'll just go along with this. And platform habitat is at 10.1, right? The point, and we're not even going to talk about any blurring effect. This was wonderful conditions, right? While you're looking off the distance, very little refraction, very little atmospheric lensing. Point is, and we even missed this for a while. You know, I didn't even post this until 2020, which is, what do you see off in the distance? You see the horizon. The horizon line is behind those two oil rigs, respectively. And this is video. This is not still shots. The horizon line is behind. There is no atmospheric effect that can pull the horizon behind those objects. The horizon has to be in front of them.
So that's Mark's explanation of this image. Well, it's not this image, it's the video, right? But this image is the same. I think this might be a piece taken from the video that you're looking right now. The difficulty with this, for those people who don't accept the flat earth, is when you use this as evidence and say this is the singular piece of evidence we need to disprove the globe, what do you do when images like this turn up, which are exactly the same two oil rigs, which are exactly located and situated as you would expect them to on the globe? Let's put them side by side so you can have a look at them. Now, if I was being generous, I would say at the very least, you have to say from a flat earth perspective that the evidence is inconclusive, because you've seen those two images side by side. They say different things. Therefore, you can't cherry pick one and say the globe is dead, the debate is over, because you're presented with the opposing view in the other image. So being generous, I'm going to suggest that you can't say that the debate is over. At the very most, and it's being generous, you have to say that it's ongoing or inconclusive. Now, I'm actually not going to disagree with the flat earthers that really every theory should fit with your model. So one theory or one piece of evidence that contravenes your model is a problem to your model. And I just want to reference again, we just talked about Mark Sargent. When I actually had Mark Sargent on, I came up with a bunch of questions, and I said to Mark Sargent at the start of our podcast together, and this is on one of the previous videos, you can go have a look at it. I need you to answer these questions for me to buy your flat earth theory. That's what I said. Basically, I was putting out a series of what I believe are black swans, because if you can't prove this, or if your evidence can't explain why this is, you have no case. Singular questions, singular items. I won't go through all of them. This is on my blog. You can go look for it for yourself. But a couple of the more important ones that you need to be able to explain on a flat earth model, and if you can't, I believe, well, that's another black swan for the globe conversation. Is, for example, what causes the sun to change its path around the flat earth from a tight circle in the northern hemisphere summer to a large circle in the southern hemisphere summer? Now, Mark's response to that was a needle on a record player, and we've talked about that before. It's not a particularly scientific answer. What about this one? I believe that this is an absolute black swan for flat earth people. If you can't explain this, then your argument's over. It's finished. You can't still claim it. The sun has different circumferences. If you have a look at the map here, you can see the circumferences that the flat earthers kind of accept in mass. Not all of them believe this map en masse. The sun has different circumferences as it travels around the flat earth model. The speed would have to be different that the sun travels, because it always makes one full circumference in 24 hours. So a tight circle around this orange circle, northern hemisphere summer, it's a smaller distance to travel than the large green circle on the outside, southern hemisphere summer. If it's traveling further, yet still taking 24 hours, then it's got to move faster. We don't see that in the sun in the sky. The sun speed does not actually increase. If you can't explain that or demonstrate something other to that, that to me is a black swan. And I also think there's another one here as well. Actually, we'll do this even though this is not really a part of my conversation. On a globe map, Auckland to Los Angeles is approximately 10,500 kilometers. Auckland to Santiago, Chile is approximately 9,700 kilometers. So less than 1,000 Ks difference. The flight times are very, very similar. However, if you look at a flat earth model, you can see that from one to the other, it's double the distance. How can a plane travel from Auckland to these two distances on a flat earth, which appears to be about double the distance, but basically take the same time to fly there? You can't explain that to us, then that's a black swan. That's conversation over. Now, I think personally a really big black swan that kills the flat earth is Antarctica. The question I asked Mark, and this is a question that if you can't answer, I believe it's a black swan for the flat earth. The conversation's basically finished. If the ice wall is Antarctica and the Earth has one light source being the sun, then when Antarctica is in 24 hours sunlight, the whole world would need to be in 24 hours of sunlight. Why don't we observe this? Mark's response was basically, we don't know. We don't know. He suggested that there could be possibly multiple light sources, which I've never heard anyone say before, but that's where Mark went. Now, I think that this is a fascinating conversation around Antarctica, because if you could explain to me how that works on a flat earth model, I would listen to you. I would genuinely listen to you. So I heard an interesting piece of commentary the other day by our old mate, Nathan Oakley, claiming he has evidence that is not 24 hours of daylight in Antarctica. He was talking on his show several weeks ago when I got involved in all of this and was listening around a little bit about an interview he did, which he uses as empirical evidence that says Antarctica does not have 24 hours of daylight. Have a listen to his claim in one of his conversations.
I've interviewed a guy who's not experienced 24 hours of daylight in Antarctica. He spent 18 months there. Have you ever spoken to anybody ever that's been in Antarctica? Because I spoke to a chap who was a plumber on one of the rigs that's out there and spent 18 months there and categorically stated he didn't experience 24 hours sunlight. So, unless you've been in Antarctica and can top Robert Shortman's personal testimony that doesn't happen, I think we'll stick with your original claim that there's pictures of Earth from a sky vacuum outside sphere-shaped air. Because that's about the 12th time I've put it to you, and like a total coward, You haven't acknowledged it once.
Now, to me, this is an unbelievably interesting claim, because if that is the truth, if there are people who have experienced life in Antarctica through summer with no with darkness at nighttime, that would absolutely point to evidence against the globe model that we're told about. And I guess towards it may not point towards a flat Earth, but it would certainly, at the very least, point towards the globe model we're being told about right now is not accurate. So, being someone who has worked in news and current affairs for nearly 20 years, being someone who likes to get to the bottom of questions and get the answer for themselves, I reached out to Robert Shortman. I made advances. I contacted Robert, or I attempted to contact Robert directly through his Facebook page. I didn't hear back. I attempted to contact Robert through his work page and heard back from his father. Lovely man, said he'd pass on the details to Robert and get him to come back to me. I didn't hear anything for a wee while. I've been working on this for a few weeks. So I then phoned the number in the UK from here in New Zealand and actually spoke to his dad. His dad was lovely. He saw that my number came up and I was from New Zealand, and we had a bit of a chat about, COVID around the world and COVID, and he was, his father voiced signs of being jealous of New Zealand's at then COVID-free status. It was not the case today, but at then. And he said he'd pass on the message to Robert, and he didn't say get Robert to get back to me. Obviously, there's no demand on Robert to get back to me, but he said he'd pass it on. He did. I didn't hear anything back. I texted one more time. I didn't hear anything back. And then finally I wrote a message because I said, I am moving forward on the post that I want to do. I just wanted you guys to know that I really would like to speak to Robert because I want to get some accuracy with this and clear things up. Because if what Robert's saying is true, then this is amazing. I would like to get some clarity because there's mixed messages. The response I got for the first time ever from Robert said, first of all, you're very deluded and haven't got a clue about the world and who created it. The world is ending. Jesus Christ created everything. It's called creation. And personally, I don't believe in the satanic, Masonic bullshit from this world. I'm sure you've had the vaccine and have been indoctrinated into lies. Defamation is when a person or organization uses language to ruin the reputation of a person or business. Slander is spoken defamation. Written defamation or libel is anything published or broadcast. Be warned, I will. Now, I'm assuming he left out a sentence there, or maybe he re-edited it and said something like, you'll be hearing from my lawyers or something. At this point, all I was looking for was a conversation with Robert about his experiences. And I reiterated that to Robert and said, look, we just want your experiences. That's all we're looking for. But we have no claims to your time. You don't have to come on board. But I'd like some clarity because we're going to be talking about this. And long story short, Robert doesn't want to be involved, and that's fine. So with the understanding that I haven't spoken to Robert Shortman, I am moving forward with some of the things that Robert Shortman has said to ask some questions. So on Robert Shortman's work page, it says that he has spent 18 months in Antarctica. An 18-month sabbatical in Antarctica is what it talks about Robert on his website, his work website. I saw a conversation between Patricia Steer, I believe it is, and Robert at a UK meetup for Flat Earth in the last couple of weeks, where he said in that conversation that he'd been there for 12 months, not 18 months. So there was a discrepancy there already. Then there's also an actual post written by Robert Shortman when he was at the base that you can see in front of you, where he identified himself as the winter plumber. Now, I'm not accusing Robert of anything, but from someone who has an inquisitive mind and a journalistic look on the world, there are some inconsistencies there with the story. We've seen 18 months, we've heard 12 months, and we've seen winter plumber. Now, what is a winter plumber? Is that 3 months? Is that 6 months? Is that 12 months? I don't know. But because this is what I wanted to talk to Robert about, there are some inconsistencies in the story on the internet. And as you'll be aware, looking back to the piece I played from Nathan Oakley's show, he said he had talked to Robert for a good period of time, and that was his evidence, Nathan's evidence, for there being not 24 hours of light in Antarctica. Fine. So I went and I found the clip, and here it is for you.
Cool. Oh, okay. forget all of that.
I was going to say, let's get straight on to the decent questions. I mean, the question that came up first and foremost on a lot of the comments was, is there 24-hour daylight in Antarctica?
24-hour daylight. I mean, the way I explain it is the daylight is similar to like in Norway and Alaska, and obviously that, you know, is 18, 20 hours, and then you get a merge in between. So when I was there, because I wasn't aware of all the flat Earth truths and facts that I know now, the position of being aware of where the sun wasn't so much important.
Now let's just have a look at what was said in that. Robert said this, talking of Antarctica and the 24-hour sun. He says daylight is similar to like in Norway and Alaska, and obviously that, you know, it's 18, 20 hours, and then you get a merge in between. A merge in between. So a merge in between day and night. What would a merge in between day and night be? Well, I would propose that would be dusk or dawn. It wouldn't be dark. Now, I know Nathan, if he sees this, is going to say I've been selectively editing. Nathan, as he wants to do, asked the very direct question, yes or no. Was there? Well, I'll just play it for you.
So, Robert, just so we've got absolute clarity, is there 24-hour daylight in Antarctica, yes or no?
I'd say no, not all the time. No.
So you would see that, and it would seem very clearly that Robert has said that there was not 24 hours of daylight. Now, does that mean there was darkness? Because for the globe model to fall over, there needs to be darkness. Or unfortunately for Nathan, and for people who use this as a quote, Robert Shortman has been on some other podcasts. How about one about 3 or 4 months after the Nathan Oakley podcast? Robert was on a podcast called FE UK Flat Earth UK, the Flat Earth Antarctic podcast. And this is what he had to say then.
So it was 13 months straight working. So that's quite heavy going before you got a month off.
Yeah, the summertime period, you know, when there's a lot more daylight period, and you get a lull in daylight, but you don't get darkness as in such, you know, the sun moves to one side and then disappears kind of thing, and then it just comes back. So yeah, that's interesting.
That is interesting, actually. It's so interesting. Let's play it again.
You get a lull in daylight, but you don't get darkness as in such, you know.
Maybe even just one more time.
But you don't get darkness as in such, you know.
And let's have a look at the words that Robert Shortman said in that conversation. Yeah, the summertime period, you know, when there's a lot more daylight period, and you know, you get a lull in daylight, but you don't get darkness. Now, if Nathan Oakley is allowed to use one quote as empirical data, absolute evidence, then so am I. So his same source, Nathan's same source, Robert Shortman stating there that there is not darkness during the summertime in Antarctica. Now, if there is not darkness in Antarctica during summertime, that is a black swan. Now, if you don't have evidence that contradicts that, we now know, using Nathan Oakley's own witness, the person that many in the flat earth hold up to as their singular example of someone who talks about Antarctica and there being not 24 hours of light, we now know that there is no darkness in Antarctica over the southern hemisphere summer. So as people like Nathan want to do, they say things like, well, that's now been debunked. You can't use that anymore. Well, Nathan, that's now been debunked. You can't use that anymore. And should anyone visit your debate channel, which from here in New Zealand is on in the middle of the night, so I never get to see or hear it. Not that I am particularly interested, but if anyone else maybe was to get on there in the next few days, you could tell Nathan that that is now debunked. The person who he holds up as the example of evidence has stated it does not get dark in Antarctica over summer. So where to from here? Well, this is actually very, very simple for you flat earthers. I want some evidence, And if you give me the evidence, I will accept. Well, will I accept the whole flat Earth model? I don't know, but I certainly will accept that you're a lot closer to being correct than not. I think this is a really fair thing. I'm not going to challenge you on Antarctica. I think that I've given enough evidence to show that at the very least, there are some questions still. At the very most, you cannot use Robert Shortman as evidence that it's not 24 hours of daylight in Antarctica anymore. This is my country. This is New Zealand. Hopefully you can see this because it's quite small. Go watch me on your big TV. I live at the bottom of New Zealand. This is what you need to explain to me. The longest day of the year here in Dunedin, the sun is up as in the sky for about 16 hours a day. It then gets very dark and dusky for 3 hours either side of sunset and sunrise. I'm not saying it's daylight. I'm not even saying it's a normal sort of dusk. It's a heavy dusk, but it's certainly not proper nighttime dark. That's for about 3 hours in the middle of the night, from about midnight to about 3 a.m. I've driven at midnight before with no headlights on and could see fine. You know, there's enough light to see fine, but still we'll stick with the 16 hours. The sun is in the sky. The sun is up for 16 hours on the longest day. Explain to me this. This is my challenge to you. And if you can't take a challenge and take it on board and explain how your theory works, then you have a problem with your theory. Hopefully you can see the mouse on the screen. This is approximately the ring that your flat Earth model says the sun takes in the Northern Hemisphere summer. In the Northern Hemisphere summer, okay, my country, certainly down the bottom here, has daylight some days between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. So not a lot, right? What is that? 8 a.m. Gosh, that's really short. That's like 10 hours. Let's say it's 10 hours a day. I don't have the exact numbers. For 10 hours a day, when the sun's traveling around here for 10 hours a day. Explain to me this. When the sun's traveling around the full outside circle, which is what you classify as a Southern Hemisphere summer, how can it be sunlight, the sun up, not just light, for 16 hours? Think about this. When the sun is on the furthest western or eastern part of the circumference, it is further away from my country under your model than it is the whole circumference of the Northern Hemisphere winter model that you put out there. When the sun travels all the way around here, all the way around the bottom, and all the way back up to here, this whole semicircle is further away from my country under your model than the whole circumference around the center of the map, which is your Northern Hemisphere winter. How on earth, when the sun is closer, according to your map, in the Northern Hemisphere winter, I'm getting confused now. No, sorry, the Northern Hemisphere summer, when the sun is closer to my country, which is here, do I have a shorter day? And when the sun is further away from my country, over here, I have a longer day. That's all I want to know. I'm not going to challenge you on Antarctica. I'll leave you alone with that. You can think about it for yourself. You can see very clearly when the sun is doing the tight Northern Hemisphere summer circle, that whole circle, it is closer to my country than when it does the whole bottom half of the semicircle during the Southern Hemisphere summer. How are my days longer when the circumference is so much bigger and the sun is so much further away? This is evidence that I see every single year. This is not me trusting someone else. This is not me cherry picking. Longest day of the year, 16 hours of sunlight, the sun being up in the sky. How is that possible when the sun is so much further away as it circumnavigates the outside of your globe model? That's it. You explain that to me, I will be one step closer to accepting your full model of the flat Earth. And I will. I said to Mark Sargent, and I say to you, you answer these questions for me, you show me the evidence, and I will get closer. But please don't bring me evidence that I can Google search a response to and see that you're wrong. Show me the evidence why in Dunedin, 16 and a half hours of sunlight is seen when the sun is further away for half the day than in the Northern Hemisphere summer. Pretty simple. Do that, and I will rebroadcast your information and say, yep, they answered the question. Nobody answers the question. I'll take that as a you can't. Feel free though. I genuinely would like to hear from you. Until we see you next time then, hooroo.